Hello and welcome back to Not Even Mad, a show that raises your interest by lowering interest rates. Today we speak of Charlie Kirk's assassination and Trump administration, shall we say, excesses? It's really hard to narrow it down when you just say excesses. And of course, as always, our beloved goat grinders. So who are we? Well, I have with me Michael A. Cohen. He writes the newsletter on Substack, Truth and Consequences, is a contributor to MSNBC, and he's got a 70s show movie podcast. That's not the right title. It's the 70 Millimeter Podcast, right?
It's that 70s movie podcast, yes.
And what's the 70s movie you're doing this week?
We just got finished actually talking about 3 Days the Condor, starring Robert Redford, of course, passed away yesterday.
Is that why you did it? Because of Redford?
Actually, we were planning to do it, and then it just happened that, unfortunately. So we have to be very careful who we talk about. What movie we talk about next week? We don't want to.
Yeah,
we don't want to be responsible for
it's the well-known curse of that 70s movie
it's
podcast that everyone
exactly
talks
right.
about. Yeah,
exactly right.
We also have with us James Kirk, who is the author of Secret City, a frequent contributor to Politico, and a contributor to the New York Times opinion pages. Hello, James. What's your favorite? Or I could call you Jamie, and I shall.
You can call me Jamie.
What's your favorite 70s movie? Or what do you want to hear Cohen do next?
My favorite 70s movie? That's a tough question. Maybe One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That's pretty good. And from what I understand, taught America all the wrong things about mental health. But it was pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Shoot the ball, Chief. Well, Tyler Robinson has been arraigned in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. What we know now, he was, as was originally reported and somewhat disputed, in a relationship with a trans individual who is helping authorities. He inscribed on the bullets, including the one that struck Kirk, anti-fascist and pro-furry messages. But there's some thought that it was just shit posting and memes. So a little bit of nihilism and not a firm belief, although he did specifically target someone that he thinks of as a fascist and who espouses, in his mind, anti-trans sentiment. Immediately after the shooting, the president of the United States, when asked by that notable unifying force, Fox News, how do you bring the country together, said, I'll tell you, I don't really care about bringing the country together. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious. Trump retreating to his priors. But so did everyone else in media, and I've been decrying this trend. I don't know if it's a lone voice in the wilderness, but I've gotten much more pushback and guff by trying to say maybe now is not the time to issue the bill of particulars against Charlie Kirk while the blood is still coagulating on the floor. I want to start with you, Jamie, as I ask you afterwards, beyond the actual fact of the political shooting, did the discussion afterwards depress you as much as it depressed me?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just don't understand why people haven't learned by this point that in the immediate aftermath of a tragedy like this, you could say something that could be totally off base. People will see that in a couple of weeks, right? Or however long it takes. I really think in the social media, it's this temptation to weigh in, to offer your take, to look for the so-called evidence. Every little leak from law enforcement gets blown out of proportion, taken at face value. And why people don't think about their track records, right? Like if you're in the business of punditry, you would think by now, since we have these sorts of tragedies, far too often, that people would just wait a little bit. Just wait until the facts emerge. But we can't do that anymore. I mean, that's what I do now at this point. I try my best not to jump to conclusions, at least publicly. I might have, private conversations with people in which I speculate on what the political motivations of a killer might be. But I'm not going to put my name to something in print or say it on air if I'm not entirely sure of what the stated motive of the killer is.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that what I was more talking about, and that sentiment is something I absolutely co-sign, is the retreat to the priors and arguing essentially the politics of Charlie Kirk, the necessity of arguing that. It could go both ways, and I know that Cohen engaged in a higher-minded version of that than some others. But what do you think of that? Because but what do you think of that?
So there's two things there. I mean, Jamie, to your point about why people do this, I mean, I think that the reason is just because, there's benefit to ginning up outrage. And I think what I was struck by, they hadn't even captured the suspect yet. And you had the President of the United States blaming the far left for this. I mean, and it was across the board. It wasn't just, it was politicians, it was journalists. I mean, you had Democrats out there saying, we condemn this. And Republicans immediately blaming the left for it. And this isn't, and even as more evidence came out, this continued. And then you get this just astonishing political hypocrisy of people saying the left is responsible for political violence in America, which, is completely not correct. And, that you're going to find people online who will say terrible things about Charlie Kirk or even cheer his death, which I find abhorrent. You're not going to find any Democratic politician who's doing this. Meanwhile, you have the President of the United States fomenting political violence by basically blaming the left. I don't care. There's no other way to put this. If you're blaming the left for a murder, you are contributing to an atmosphere of divisiveness, of hatred of your political opponents, and potentially violence. And so what's made me sort of crazy about this is that there is a bad actor in this, and it is all on one side of the equation, whatever the motives of Tyler Robinson were. And yet we seem to have a hard time just acknowledging that. And by the way, one more thing, talk about political violence. The President of the United States pardoned 1,500 people who committed the gravest act of political violence, maybe since the Civil War in this country. And that seems not even to be discussed at all. So I just find this whole conversation is not just depressing, it's misinforming Americans about what's really going on here.
Well, I would say that it's not all on one side, and I don't know
it's
that
mostly on one side.
Well, the statistics actually show that there is more right-wing extremist violence than left-wing extremist violence. And some of it depends on how you describe or define extremist. But my point was, it's not 90-10 or 80-20. There's enough extremist violence on the left or the right that if you just looked at extremist and define it correctly and violence and target that with law enforcement, you'd be much better than just looking at
But I'm not actually making that.
It.
I'm actually not even making that point as to who commits more acts of political violence. I am saying that one political party is using this as an opportunity to attack its political opponents and its political rivals, to delegitimize its political rivals. I mean, can you imagine Joe Biden giving a speech in the Oval Office, whatever you think of Joe Biden, but the same day as like the attack in Minnesota, if it happened when he was president, and immediately decrying, the far right lunatics responsible for this? I can't. I mean, I think it's just it's a mindset on the right that just takes this opportunity to just go after their political opponents and in a way that almost feels calculated.
But this exactly happened with the killing of Melissa Hortman. It was defined as he was defined as a far right lunatic, and I think lunatic is much more important than far right.
Did any Democratic politicians blame Donald Trump for that?
No,
any leading Democratic
politicians?
politicians?
This is what I don't want to get into.
I thought I heard Democrats say, and I'm sorry I don't have the evidence right in front of me, that Donald Trump has contributed to, an atmosphere of hate. This has certainly happened over the past 10 years that they've accused him. And look, I don't entirely disagree with that.
I think it's actually correct.
But there's a difference between saying that this rhetoric is contributing to an atmosphere of hate and pinning direct blame on a particular speaker or their speech, right? And I think that's an important distinction to make here. Like, for instance, I will say without qualification that much of the rhetoric coming out of the transgender movement over the past couple of years is absolutely encouraging violence, okay? To speak of a trans genocide is preposterous. But when there's a genocide going on, what do you expect people to do? How should they react? You want them to take out the people who are perpetrating the genocide. Now, are those individuals
that would be the moral act? If it
that'd
really
be the moral
were
act, right? During the Holocaust, you would kill Nazis, right? Now, are people who use that rhetoric? They're not criminally liable. Okay, I'm a First Amendment absolutist. They can say whatever they want, But, I mean, clearly this has been taking a toll, this sort of rhetoric. I mean, you can just look at what is written under everything that J.K. Rowling posts on Twitter. I mean, she has had to have, significant security now because people daily, hourly threaten her with death. And there has been an increase in the number of, trans individuals carrying out mass shootings that appear to have been, in at least partly or maybe largely, if not entirely, inspired by the sort of radical transgender ideology.
But I think we have to differentiate here between activists, people on Twitter, people on social media, and the President of the United States. And yes. I will just add on the trans issue, the President of the United States and this administration have fundamentally sought to dehumanize trans Americans. I mean, I don't have any question about this. And I think when you look at the ban on trans soldiers in the military, the sort of gratuitous acts that the DOD has taken against not just trans community, but the LGBT community. You take the Harvey Milk ship incident is one example of that. I think that there is this is not coming from some fringe of the party. It's coming from the party leadership itself. And I think that is the difference. And I'm getting really frustrated, and I'm not pointing at you, Jamie, but I'm getting frustrated seeing this conflation of yahoos on Twitter and Republican politicians and Republican presidents saying these things. I mean, look, Stephen Miller goes on Twitter, maybe the most powerful person in America, and says that the left needs to be wiped out because they're a threat to civilization, society, and families. I mean, that's like fascist, authoritarian language.
It's not just yahoos on Twitter. It's not just tweeters on Yahoo. It is prominent voices on the left, not even the far left, not the I don't even know what a groyper is or anti-groyper is, right or left. After the killing of Kirk, The Nation magazine wrote a piece, Charlie Kirk's legacy deserves no mourning. End of paragraph 1, he had children, as do many vile people. Third paragraph, a Hitler comparison. And then, of course, the obligatory, we believe in truth, quote, we live in a culture where manners are more often valued than truth. And we should note that that article misquoted Charlie Kirk in a way that J.D. Vance, when he read on the plane with Charlie Kirk's widow and kids, drove him crazy, he said, and called it propaganda. Now, here's what I want to do. The President of the United States is unbelievably powerful and unbelievably incendiary. Absolutely. And there's no equivalent in terms of power, voice, anything else, irresponsibility on the left. No equivalent. Same with Stephen Miller. You could probably go down the list and find a whole bunch of people in the administration who are so much worse in terms of stoking flames. Of course, their friend and pal got murdered, so maybe you can excuse that. But that absolutely went on. And then, Michael, you wrote a piece right afterwards. Let us now document the sins of Charlie Kirk. And I was saying, I do not think, even if you're a member of the media who has always believed that Charlie Kirk has said odious things, I think it would be great if you just held your fire, as it were, on that day. Didn't happen. I kind of thought it wouldn't happen. But if we could go back, I'll ask you, Michael, do you think that was... I'll ask the question this way. I was calling for more de-escalatory rhetoric, writing, contribution to the public sphere. It didn't happen. Do you think I was wrong to emphasize and want that?
I mean, look, I can't that's a hard question to answer. I mean, you have to make your own choice in what you think is important to stress. And I think the reason I wrote, and it wasn't my first piece I wrote about Charlie Kirk. I think it was maybe the second piece. But my argument was really that he's become canonized. And I was really frustrated mostly by that piece by Ezra Klein in the New York Times, which he basically said that Kirk exhibited the kind of politics that, I can't remember the expression he used, that he did politics the right way. And my argument is no, he didn't. He did politics the wrong way. He did politics that were intended to divide people. He did politics that intended to demonize people. I think his death is a tragedy. I am heartbroken at the fact that his kids are never going to know their father. And he's 31 years old. I mean, he's very young. And as I said in that piece, he'll never get the chance to evolve and to grow as a person. And that's a real tragedy. But we should also be very clear as to, who he was and what kind of rhetoric he put out there. He was not a bridge builder. He was not trying to convince people. He was trying to embarrass liberals. And he tried to demonize liberals. And so I think that, we should not... This idea we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, I don't really agree with. I mean, I think that you speak honestly,
and I will compliment your
about
piece.
people.
Yeah, I will compliment your piece insofar as it came a couple days after, was a reaction. Your headline was, "We can and should mourn Charlie Kirk's death," as opposed to the Instant Nation piece, "Charlie Kirk's legacy deserves no mourning." And I'll say what J.D. Vance called for was essentially going after the nation.
Can I say that is a lot worse? Okay.
Yeah.
What the nation published was vile and disgusting, and I disagreed with its mischaracterizations of who Kirk was. But that really pales in comparison to the Vice President of the United States seizing upon an article in a magazine he doesn't like, and then threatening to go after the magazine's donors with the power of the federal government. That is an absolute outrage, and that's what really should be outraging us. And I want to say just one more thing. I mean, Christopher Hitchens was a friend of mine, and he was famous for, like, the body was still warm, and he would write, of Mother Teresa, she was a thieving, fanatical Albanian dwarf, okay, and he did similar things to Jerry Falwell. So right. I can't tell other writers or other people that they should, hold off on expressing their feelings about a very controversial person. And I can disagree with what they might say about that person. I can take issue with the specific claims that they make. But if the individual was someone as, a political, firebomb thrower, which is what Kirk was, and, I agreed with him on some things, I disagreed with him on most things. I think it depends on what you say and how you say it about the person. And Michael, I read your piece on Kirk, and I thought that it was fair to him, and I don't think that you were like disrespecting his soul or whatnot. But a lot of the people, but a lot of the leftists who have been writing things about him, like the Person of the Nation, and there have been many others, have been sort of reveling in his death. And while I consider that gruesome and disgusting, and I think that there should be lots of social shame attached to that. And frankly, I don't have a problem if school teachers who are like taking videos of themselves reveling in the death of someone, I think those people should be fired, okay? Because I don't understand how you can teach children when you do something like that, okay? An airplane pilot, like, I don't understand how his views on Charlie Kirk's death would in any way impact his, flying a plane. Right.
The manager of a Texas roadhouse in the Florida Panhandle, whose wife opined on it.
But I looked. Some of these people who were being attacked were just basically saying, "I'm sorry he died," but like he said terrible things, and that was not seen as being reverential enough to Charlie Kirk's memory. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to play that game. Look, people want to praise him on the right, they're welcome to do so. But I certainly have a right on the left, and people in my lives who are affected by his rhetoric. I don't get to details here, but his rhetoric, especially on LGBT issues, affects people in my life, and I have a right to say that that's hate-filled, and it's not something that deserves to be praised.
I think it's a sign of an unhealthy society. If someone dies, regardless of, maybe they're not controversial at all, and you're not allowed, or your livelihood is taken away from you because you don't fall in line with what the mass of people are saying. I mean, we live in a democracy, and people are allowed to say terrible, awful, insulting things, and that also applies to people in the minutes after their death.
Yeah, by the way, I remember when J.D. Vance went to Europe in February and attacked the Europeans for basically, trying to outlaw hate speech, and this is exactly what he's trying to do now.
Right.
Has anyone in the administration shown one scintilla of commitment to free speech or to free expression or to just? And Andrew Sullivan said this well when he cataloged a litany of the offensive things, odious things, hateful things that Charlie Kirk said, and then said, so what? Yeah. He's allowed to say that. I disagree with him. My number one issue, Sullivan is saying, is gay marriage, and I think he was hateful to gay people, and so what? This is where we are or should be as Americans.
If I could say, Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, whose job it is to enforce the laws, a couple days ago said that we're going to go after hate speech, okay? The first thing you should learn in law school is that there's no such thing as hate speech, okay? It's not a legal category. And so to hear her say that was really frightening, I have to say. Now, are they going to actually do this? I think they'll try. But, fortunately, our courts are pretty good when it comes to the First Amendment. And I don't see these challenges really holding up in court. But the very fact that it's being raised by the highest, law enforcement officer in the country is really disturbing.
Yeah. And what do you make of the list generated by Christopher Rufo, who was a person who became famous for, among other things, decrying cancel culture, a list of those that can be contributed to by the public who misspoke or who said something that was offensive to Christopher Rufo or Charlie Kirk fans afterwards? Here's my question. It's wrong. It's not in keeping with free speech. But just to analyze it, is there some sort of strategy that I'm not picking up on? Or is it just now that we have power, we're going to use it to punish our enemies?
I think you just put your finger on it exactly. I think it's that, look, as I said before, they didn't even know who the person was responsible for the crime. And they were, for Charlie Kirk's murder, and they were already vilifying the left. And if you look at the rhetoric that's coming out by Stephen Miller, Trump was basically, we have to go after organizations that have promoted this. I think they just saw this as an opportunity. And I think their mindset is, how do we screw with our political enemies and our political rivals? And this was just an opportunity presented to them to do exactly that.
Yeah. It's not often, it's actually never that you hear me say a kind word about Bernie Sanders. But I will say that his response to this was perfect. There was not a single syllable that was off note. He did a 5-minute video where he just came out and said, look, Charlie Kirk and I didn't agree on anything. Okay, but this is absolutely wrong. We cannot have political violence in this country. And, that everyone across the political spectrum should be modeling or following his model.
He and Spencer Cox were really the only two bright points that I could find. I also want to ask each of you about this. In the minutes after Charlie Kirk was dead, and this isn't any sort of disgusting legacy besmirching effort, but this is something that friends of mine who are largely apolitical, there was a discussion and someone sent me this tweet, which is an accurate comment. Charlie Kirk, 2023. We've all seen this. I think it is worth it's worth to have a couple of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so we can have the Second Amendment. That is a prudent deal. That is rational. No one talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. So there is the, provocateur tendency to say, no one's talking like this. I'm saying the thing that no one says. He said that about the Civil Rights Act being a mistake also. But it did strike me that in the immediate aftermath, this was the number one meme or rebuttal I saw by reasonable people. When you think about it just for a second, everyone who believes in guns or the Second Amendment, which is I think when you see polling on the Second Amendment specifically, there is not majority opinion to scrap the Second Amendment. Everyone who believes in this, maybe they don't work out the second order effects of believing in it, but that's what they'd have to believe in to have a Second Amendment.
Yeah, this is not
come with the benefit.
This is not. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the question is, not even just talking about if that is or is not an acceptable sentiment. I took the immediate injection of this idea as another depressing sign of where our society has gone. Yeah. Saying things like karma or saying things like fuck around and find out. That was another meme that depressed me. People are allowed to say it, but it's not good in terms of de-escalation or taking us to a better place. Sorry, James.
There's nothing remarkable about that comment he made. Okay, I'm not a big Second Amendment guy. Okay, I barely touched a gun. But I wrote an article a long time ago for the Daily Beast. You can look it up, where I made this exact point, that Second Amendment supporters, they view the Second Amendment as they do the First Amendment. Okay? And if you support the First Amendment, you support freedom of speech, you're going to accept that there are negative consequences of that. There's going to be a lot of nasty, hateful, bigoted speech that society will have to put up with. But we've decided as a society that it's better to have the freedom than to abolish it altogether because of speech we don't like. They apply that same principle to the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms is too important, too foundational to what it means to be a free citizen in a republic, to take that away because some people might abuse that right. Now, there are criticisms you can make of this argument. The first most obvious one being that, quote unquote, abusing the First Amendment isn't violent, okay? It's like horrible, nasty, bigoted, racist, whatever you want to call it, but it's not an actual violent act. Whereas, abusing the Second Amendment can lead to death and destruction. So there's an obvious, qualitative difference here. But I think what he said is a perfectly respectable argument, and it's one I agree with as someone who does support the right to bear arms. Of course, we acknowledge that there are going to be people who abuse that freedom. But that's what living in a free society is about, okay? It means having responsibility, and there are risks, right? The alternative is to live in an utter dictatorship, okay? Where you have no choices and no freedoms, and the government takes all the guns, and the government doesn't give you the freedom to speak your mind. And sure, that's maybe ostensibly a safer society, but it's not one that I think most people want to live in. Now, what you were saying, this use of using this very, in my opinion, anodyne comment as a sort of gotcha it's moronic, okay? Because again, what he said is not controversial. That's my 2 cents.
I actually, I'm going to push back a little on that because I think that Kirk is relying on a straw man to some extent because no one is talking about taking guns away from people.
Well,
right? People are saying,
of course they are.
That's not true. I mean, I remember years ago. The reason I wrote this column years ago, it was because Hillary Clinton brought up the example of Australia, and she said, "Look, there are societies that they have a terrible mass shooting, and then they implement quote unquote gun control, and there's never a problem again." I mean, the gun control that they implemented in Australia was gun confiscation.
Right,
it was taking away all the guns.
I understand that, but to be clear, Hillary Clinton has never openly offered support for gun confiscation. And
to say Australia is a good example of what to do.
Okay, but let's say this: most gun control advocates, and I'm looking at like the Everytown folks, sure. They basically want legislation to make it harder to purchase guns. They want to place restrictions like background checks.
The vast majority of gun control advocates know it's such a non-starter, or maybe they even believe in their heart of hearts that some guns are okay, like most countries in Europe have for shooting at a range. But go ahead.
Right. So the question is really like, are you willing to accept those kinds of restrictions? But people like Kirk and others just make it out to being a binary between either you want to banish guns or you want to have no laws to restrict guns. And so I just think that that's not really a fair way to I think it's fair to bring it up actually, to say like, if this is what you believe about guns, then this is the end result. I gotta put it a different way. This is the end result of believing that we should be able to accept gun violence in this country. And the thing is, what makes me crazy about these kinds of incidents, all of these incidents, all these mass shootings, all of these, is that we talk about the motive. We don't talk about the instrument, because what is the motive is to my mind secondary. Now, maybe in this case it's a little different because there's an act of political violence, but I still think it's secondary. The issue is we allow people in this country, including 22-year-olds, to go out and purchase high caliber weaponry that they can use to kill people with. That is the bottom line, and we don't place restrictions on their ability to do so. In fact, we're loosing restrictions on their ability to do so, and that's why we're the most violent. We have the most gun violence of any society in the world. And so, to me, like, I wish we talked about the gun element of this, because that's really the story here. Every country in the world has some elements of political violence. I mean, in Japan, the Japanese prime minister was killed, what was it, 6 months ago, 9 months ago? I forget what
it was. It was a couple years ago.
Was it a couple years ago? Okay, I'm old. I can't remember these things anymore. But basically, he got stabbed. I mean, and my point is that, and we have actually in this country, if you look at the numbers, we have vanishingly small amounts of political violence in this country. It's very, very rare in America. What makes, the situation worse, though, is that we have easy access to guns. And I just think that should be the conversation. And I have no problem bringing this up, that this is what gun control 2A supporters believe. And this is the logical outcome of that, is that people are going to die, including people that people actually care about.
To go back
on the
to
right.
Shinzo Abe was shot and killed by a firearm that the guy assembled himself.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Parts. You're right. I'm thinking of something else.
And this also happened
in
the UK killing of the parliamentarian. These are societies with strict gun control rules.
Right.
My point isn't people will get around it, but I think if you look, gun control is an issue that's mostly about inner city killings and gang killings and interpersonal killings, and actually mostly about suicide. Actual assassinations, especially with long guns, which would be the thing that would be least likely to regulate. I don't know any sort of gun regulation that is proposed by an Everytown USA that would have taken the guns out of this shooter who, from what we know, didn't have any red flags hands. But
Yeah.
Jamie, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to go back to the First Amendment comparison, which is how the real strong Second Amendment supporters look at this. It's like the slippery slope when it comes to free speech. right? If you really believe in free speech, then you have to oppose all of these attempts, no matter how innocuous seeming they are, to limit speech. People who want to ban hate speech, well, that's a slippery slope, right? So they view gun control efforts as a slippery slope towards the total confiscation of all our guns. Now, you can view that as a, crazy, paranoid view.
I do.
But it's okay. But that is that's a deeply, I think, sincere belief that they have.
Well, I mean, listen, in this country, there's no absolute rights in this country. We create limitations on every right that's in the Constitution, and the Second Amendment should be no different. Sorry, go ahead.
And Jamie, earlier in the show, you identified yourself as a First Amendment absolutist.
Yes.
I know you're a First Amendment maximalist, but I know there are a couple things you're against in terms.
Well, I support what the Supreme Court has ruled.
Yes. Here is my question, though, and Michael, since you're a historian, after JFK was killed by a gun, there was no social media and no ability to disseminate a sentiment widely. But I have never heard of people saying, well, he was a member of the NRA. Karma, which probably wasn't a popularly known concept back then. He had it coming. He didn't oppose gun control. And then after RFK was shot, and you know a lot about this, RFK did propose some forms of gun control, but very, very mild compared to even what is being asked of now. And after he was killed, I don't think anyone said, oh, he only wanted to ban, he didn't even want to ban the kind of gun that killed him. This seems to be a modern sentiment where we retreat to our priors, where we play gotcha. And it's part of, I hate to be the old man saying, look at society these days, but it is a good example of a difference from 50 years ago or 60 years ago, when, from what I perceive, because I wasn't born, people had more normal sentiments of mourning the dead and not turning it into a political point.
Well, but hold on. Gun violence was way more prevalent today than it was in the 1960s. And in fact, actually, it's interesting. I mean, I hadn't thought about this before, but there weren't a lot of calls for gun violence when JFK was killed. And I think in part because there wasn't a lot of gun control. There wasn't a lot of gun violence in the country. But by 68, crime had increased exponentially, and there was a lot more gun violence. And so there was legislation that was pushed. If I remember correctly, it was actually what LBJ pushed after Kennedy's assassination was pretty aggressive, and it was watered down in Congress. But there was legislation that was passed after Kennedy's death to limit access to create some gun control measures. And so I think that the difference now is that gun violence has become so endemic in our society. I mean, I was struck by the same day as Charlie Kirk shooting, there was a shooting in Colorado. And I saw this interview with an 8-year-old boy who was at the school, and he basically said, he sort of said something to the extent of, well, I figured it would happen eventually here. I mean, that's kind of where the kind of thing we're raising kids to sort of see this as just a part of life in America. That wasn't the case 50 years ago. It just wasn't.
Yeah, the last thing as we talk about Kirk, and I'll just throw this out to you, it's almost not a fully formed thought, but Charlie Kirk was a Republican, a MAGA Republican. He was, quote unquote, good at communicating that, or effective at communicating that. And when you host a podcast or a TV show, you both also say some things that maybe you regret or some things that you don't, even though they're really incendiary. Is there even a role? Is there even an acceptability for someone who believes in what almost every Republican, self-identified, not conservative, not classic liberal, but is there a role for what every Republican believes to say those things without being called, even an hour after he died, all the things that Charlie Kirk was called? Some of them maybe apply, some of them don't. I just was coming to the idea that, well, I really hate a whole bunch of stuff he said, but this is what a lot of people believe. And I don't think all of these beliefs, well, none of them make anyone deserve getting killed. But I also think we've overreacted to just how dangerous every single part of the Republican Party platform we on the left have, I think. It's not.
All I can say is that, reading a lot of these left-wing critiques of him, calling him a hate monger and whatnot, I would look into the most inflammatory things that he allegedly said, and he didn't say them. He never said that gay people should be stoned to death. He never said that black women are incompetent and, inferior. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, but I didn't agree with the guy, and I thought he was.
Yeah, he said that. He spoke about Paul Pelosi's attacker should be bailed out, but it was in
terrible. That's terrible.
But it was in the context of
he also said that Joe
Chicago
Biden should be executed. I mean, he said
What?
Joe Biden should be executed. I mean, he did say that as well.
Well, he said Joe Biden should be he's guilty of treason, and then we extrapolate from that what the penalty for treason is, which doesn't have
think
to be
he used
executed.
it.
So I hate doing this.
Okay, well,
I hate
the word
parsing of
treason,
the
I'm
words.
sorry, how many liberals have accused Donald Trump of treason? They've been doing that daily for 10 years. So, again, it's kind of the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
I
don't
mean,
think that they're... Yeah.
The problem is that Donald Trump is a much worse individual than Joe Biden. And I think we should be able to say that a lot of the things people have accused Donald Trump of are actually accurate. I mean, yeah, I think someone who incites an insurrection against a democratic election may be just of treason, but that's traitorous behavior, maybe. I mean, I think this is sort of the problem, is that we make these. I mean, there's an element here of just people lying, where the Republicans are basically saying that Democrats are talking the whole time about Trump and ignore the fact that, like, Trump says, he calls Democrats the worst, he called them scum or vermin, or compare the Biden administration to the Gestapo administration. He does things all the time. But I also think there's the point you raised here that, like, Trump's behavior often, is legitimately described in these terms. I mean, the things I call him an authoritarian. People call him a fascist. I don't think that's a slur. I think that's an accurate description of what he wants to do as a leader and what he's trying to do. So I think we have to be really clear here. Like, we have to be able to use our analytical abilities and say, calling Donald Trump an authoritarian is not inaccurate. It's fair. And I made this point. I mean, I the other day compared some of Steve Miller's rhetoric to rhetoric that I saw that in Mein Kampf. And I felt uncomfortable making the comparison. But the reality is it's the same kind of dehumanizing, delegitimizing rhetoric that Hitler used toward Jews and communists that Miller uses toward the left. And I think we should be able to point those things out and not sort of people say, oh, you're just doing what you accuse Trump of. No, I'm actually pointing out what are facts and things that these people have said and making, I think, what are legitimate analogies and comparisons.
Why don't you say fascist?
I'm getting to the point where I'm saying fascist. I for a long time felt it wasn't.
I don't think it's inaccurate to say that Trump and certainly Miller have fascistic qualities. I think using
Miller
the word
for sure.
Miller, absolutely, and I don't disagree with anything you just said about Miller. He's a repulsive human being.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a leap to say that Donald Trump is himself a fascist, because there's a whole ideology behind
after
that.
the two assassination attempts, this was a constant complaint. The more you call someone fascist, the more likely someone will take it into their own hands to end fascism. Because what do we really know about fascism? Do you think of the Iron League in Romania? No. People think of maybe Mussolini, definitely Hitler. And you think of the idea of, well, if someone could have stopped Hitler or strangled baby Hitler, they should have. So I do think that, accurate or not, the claim, I understand Republicans saying that this kind of puts a target on us.
But I think, look, I would say I think he uses fascist language, but I think I'm more comfortable saying authoritarian. I think it's a more accurate description. I mean, I would say that he doesn't embrace the American values, and he's anti-democratic. And on that argument, I mean, January 6th, I don't think there's anyone who could seriously argue with me on that point. So I just think that these are accurate descriptions of who Trump is. And beyond all of that, and I wrote a piece right after saying, look, if you want to know the one person responsible for fomenting political violence in America, it is Donald Trump. And no one actually brought this point up, but was it a month ago? He wants the Air Force to honor Ashley Babbitt, a woman who broke glass in order to attack members of Congress trying to certify an election, and they want to honor her. I mean, that is encouraging political violence, in my opinion, honoring somebody like that. It's honoring somebody who committed grave acts of political violence, gravest acts of political violence.
To make a sort of, I think, justified Nazi comparison, they have turned Ashley Babbitt into the kind of Horst Wessel, who was he was a member of the SA in Germany. I think he was like the first person killed by a communist in one of their street clashes.
Yeah,
and the Nazis turned him into this martyr. There was a Horst Wessel lied, a Horst Wessel song that they sang about him. And again, I'm not making Nazi comparisons to Charlie Kirk. That he was not a Nazi, obviously, but I do find a lot of what the right is doing in response to his death to be kind of eerily similar to what the Nazis did. I mean, using his death as a pretext to attack a broad base of people who have no responsibility for this murder whatsoever, right? I mean, that to me is a kind of eerie analog to what happened a long time ago.
So, Jamie, what's your assessment of when Republicans say, when you call Donald Trump a fascist, you're wishing harm to him into the world, you're putting him in the crosshairs? And Republicans who I take them as being honest about that assessment, but do you think it's mostly just opportunism and jujitsu and purposeful political umbrage taking?
I mean, I can't get in their heads, but I do somewhat agree with them that, constantly calling the president of the United States a fascist is leading people to justify political violence. I mean, look,
But what if he's fascistic, as you just said? What do you do then?
Fascistic is different than a fascist. It's different than being a Nazi. Saying that someone has fascistic
so it's
qualities.
one syllable? It's the one syllable difference?
Well, it means there's a big difference to say that someone has authoritarian qualities and, and look, after the assassination, I was disturbed. The assassination attempt on Trump. I was disturbed by the number of people who I know, not like close friends, but people in my, Facebook friends or on Twitter, people who are of my acquaintance who were expressing the belief that they wish he had died. Mm-hmm. Okay? And to me, that is a very disturbing reaction. And there's been a lot of that, by the way, this past week. I think a lot more of it surrounding Charlie Kirk. And a lot of it has been very public, by the way. And again, it's not Democratic leaders. It's not Democratic politicians. It's not leading, liberal thought leaders, pundits and whatnot. But it is a lot of people on the left who have been celebrating this.
Let us talk about some of those autocratic tendencies. I'm trying to be nice about this. In a moment, we'll get a little more specific about just a few of the latest Trump administration proposals or ideas or splenetic bleedings. Back in a minute with more of Not Even Mad. We're back with Not Even Mad. Michael A. Cohen and Jamie Kirchick join me. So Donald Trump in the last couple of days has said that NBC and ABC should have their licenses revoked, got into a tiff with Jonathan Karl of ABC, saying maybe we should target you. We already mentioned Pam Bondi and her crackdown on hate speech, quote unquote. Donald Trump is once again sending the National Guard into Memphis, Tennessee this time, which he has less authority to do than Washington, D.C., which is, of course, a federal territory. And then I don't know if you really want to get into interest rates, but there's that. What is popping out at you? How do you even perform the political triage of saying, oh, yeah, he sued the New York Times? This is the important thing. This is the bluster. Or is it okay just to note everything and say wrong, 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 Michael A. Cohen?
I mean, I think this is the problem in a lot of ways. I remember writing a piece right before the 2016 election and saying that the biggest threat of Trump winning was that he would destroy political norms and he would make the obscene seem normal. And we saw that in the first term, but in this second term, it's on steroids. I mean, I don't think I've ever, the corruption that he is engaging in, that in any other situation would be impeachable offenses. The sending the military, musing about sending the military into major cities, posting a meme where he shows U.S. military helicopter over the city of Chicago and says, the War Department's coming for you. I mean, this is the stuff that has become routine in this administration, and it's barely even remarked upon anymore. And I feel like we are all like the proverbial frog in the boiling water, that we've just become used to this kind of situation, and it's not normal. And it's so bad for the country, and it's so bad for the future of the country, the things that have become tacitly accepted. And I got to say, I mean, I put a lot of the blame for this on the American people. I mean, where is the outrage over this? I know Trump is unpopular. I know there have been protests, but I mean, we have literally National Guard on the streets of the city of Washington. We have people in unmarked vehicles wearing masks, stopping people because they speak Spanish and taking them off the street. And the Supreme Court just sanctioned it. I don't know. To me, that's the biggest issue that we're dealing with this Trump era, is that the obscene has become normal and it's become unremarkable. And I don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle.
Oh, do you want me to answer that question?
I have. Well, I have something to say. on the where is the outrage, in some instances there is, but I generally think the populace doesn't look at process. And even putting federal troops in Washington, D.C., the process of that raises questions among people like all of us. But to maybe not the people of D.C., but regular Americans who are not looking at this and reading the Posse Comitatus Act of 1870 are saying, oh, wait, crime went down by 80% when they were there. So it's very hard to get them to be outraged over process over the practical. Not that I'm buying that the big drop in crime meant anything. It wouldn't surprise me if you inject tens of thousands of federal troops, you're going to have a 1 month decrease in crime. I'll also add to the list of triage and boiling frogs. He's just striking Venezuelan boats claiming they're selling drugs. You can't do that. That's really horrific, except he can do it. He did do it. He has a lot of power when it comes to foreign affairs. Again, I don't expect America to be particularly up in arms about that. ICE agents wearing masks is more of the sort of thing that regular Americans would object to. But there is recently a lot going on that's beyond the category of bluster, I think, Jamie.
Well, I live in Washington, D.C., and I was at Union Station the other day, and in that grassy sort of plaza in front of the station, there's a giant tent encampment, multiple tents, of very left-wing protesters, and there's a giant sign that says "Fuck Trump" on it. The liberal mayor of our city, Muriel Bowser, has had really little but positive things to say about the National Guard deployment. So I can just tell you as a resident of this city, it is not the kind of fascist crackdown that people were making it out to be. It actually seems to be a pretty popular move.
What about going to Memphis? Is that a different category?
That is a different. I don't know what the situation is in Memphis, and obviously the president
there
doesn't
is
have,
a lot of crime. But
yes, but
bringing in the National Guard. And
I don't know about the
okay.
legality of. I don't know about the legality of that. Okay, I haven't followed that closely enough. If it's something that's illegal, then
not per se. It has to be an emergency situation.
Right,
which
an emergency. It doesn't
room.
seem like that, and I think a lot of this is just liberal cities with I don't want to say pro crime, but these left wing prosecutors who don't believe in prosecuting people for pretty much anything.
That's not the case with Steve Mulroy.
Right, but I'm saying a lot of these cities, and you know what? They should. It's the same way I feel about Mamdani in New York. If the citizens of New York want this, then they deserve to get it good and hard. And it's not the responsibility of the federal government to come in and save the city. Like, people elect mayors, they elect their representatives locally, and if they elect a far left mayor who doesn't believe in enforcing crime or cleaning up the city or allowing crazy homeless people to just, go off and commit crimes, then that is on the voters of that city. It's not the responsibility of the federal government to come in and fix it. What really does worry me is Trump's attacks on the media, and not his rhetorical attacks. In the first administration, it was just rhetorical attacks. He accused, saying the media, the enemy of the people, all, on a daily basis, it was these horrible, lurid attacks, but whatever, it didn't actually have the kind of same effect as what he's doing now, which is filing these lawsuits against media entities and putting these media entities into positions where they're settling for, amounts of money that in the grand scheme of things are not a lot to them. But it is a big deal to have the president of the United States suing media outlets for reporting things or presenting things about him or about the news that he doesn't like. And to my knowledge, that has never happened before in this country. And that is a very dangerous precedent that he is now set.
I agree, but I just go ahead, Mike, sorry.
I agree with that. I sometimes wonder, all right, we're in the media. That seems egregious. If we were Venezuelan boaters, not even affiliated with Tren de Aragua, maybe we would find that the most offensive.
I want to go back to what I said a second ago about the norms point. I mean, this is, I think, what happens I think we've learned something over the past 10 years, which is that, democracy is only as strong as the willingness of people in political power to enforce the rules of democracy and to adhere to basic understood norms. And we know that Trump doesn't adhere to norms. And since he doesn't adhere to norms, then we actually need, the legislative branch, the judicial branch to hold him in check. And what's I think the most telling thing about what's happened in this country is that you have the legislative branch and Republicans in the legislative branch who just refused to hold Trump accountable, and a Supreme Court that basically lets him get away with everything he wants to do. So, I think that this sort of proves the point that you really need people who have, institutions are only as strong as those people who run those institutions. And what we've seen is just a weakening of every institution. And by the way, it's not just in the federal government. I talk to people all the time in worlds of philanthropy, in journalism, in other places as well, who sort of talk about wanting to keep their head down to avoid getting scrutinized by this administration, because they don't want to deal with the political fallout from that happening. I mean, we are living in a time of there's a real chilling effect in this country. I remember at a 1 week period where I talked to people in 3 different fields who all said the same thing. It's we're just afraid of getting investigated. Oh, it was a college administrator, that we're afraid of getting targeted by the president. That is not a Democrat. That's not a democracy if that's happening. Right, that's a climate of fear, and I think that's become just routine, and people are afraid to push back on it because they're afraid of the consequences. Because they know that even if you push back on, even if you blow, you're a whistleblower, this administration and the lackeys in the Republican Party in Congress are going to come after you. There's no point in trying to do the right thing.
I'll throw one more point out there that we're all to some extent implicated, at least all of us who are still using TikTok or who are less than up in arms about the fact that Trump, in a clear, and this is the clearest violation of law and how procedure works, just chose to ignore a law enacted by Congress. And as we speak, he's meeting with Xi of China to negotiate a TikTok settlement. He is not allowed to. Congress passed the law. But I think most everyone, except a couple law professors, are okay with that because, I don't know, we want our TikTok and maybe we overreacted to the law. So I don't think I would rather have people be very upset with masked ICE agents and attacking Venezuelan supposed drug boats just in terms of prioritizing what the greatest outrage is. But that is, you don't get a clearer violation of law that if they brought it to the courts, there's no way that even Alito and Thomas, I shouldn't say that, but I would doubt that even Alito and Thomas could keep a straight face by saying, yes, the president is doing something in his power. All right, now we come to the time, since the show has been so cheery and positive, let's grouse a little. These are the things that get our goats or grind our gears. These are our goat grinders. Jamie Kirchick, start us off.
Well, I should not be surprised by this, but I have to say I was. Literally within minutes of Charlie Kirk getting shot, there were opportunists, cynical idiots on Twitter with very large followings who were spinning a tale that this was the fault of the state of Israel. And it continues to this day. Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and others are alleging that because Charlie Kirk, he was expressing all these grave reservations about the United States' relationship with Israel in the weeks leading up to his assassination, that Israel somehow decided to assassinate him. Charlie Kirk being a very loud, vocal, strident supporter of the state of Israel. It's a preposterous allegation. But the fact that it's gained so much currency is, again, just another indication to me of how virulent and widespread anti-Semitism is becoming in our society.
Michael A. Cohen, you got a goat grinder?
Well, I just got to sort of follow up on the point I was making earlier about norms. There's a story out today that the president has pressured the Department of Justice to investigate Letitia James more aggressively and to prosecute her, even though they've been able to find no evidence of wrongdoing. They're trying to do this mortgage fraud issue that they tried to get Lisa Cook at the Federal Reserve, which seemed to have spectacularly failed. Well, for now, we'll see what the Supreme Court says. And apparently, when the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, refused to indict James, the person was fired, and Trump wants to put somebody in
Virginia? But it was Virginia was the...
Yes. Because I think she has
because this is where her second mortage was?
Yeah.
Supposedly? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And he's trying to replace this person with somebody who would prosecute James. I just have to say, in any other moment in American history, this would be a slam dunk impeachable offense. It's an unambiguous abuse of presidential power. It is taking the power of justice and using it for partisan political purposes. And in the case of Trump, not even partisan, he just wants to get back to James for indicting him when she as Attorney General of New York. And along those lines, you mentioned Lisa Bondi, but also Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi, sorry. You had Todd Blanche, who's the Deputy Attorney General, attack Democrats by name a couple days ago. This violates the very idea of the DOJ being nonpartisan. And I just think it's one of these norms that we have come to it was part of the country for a very long time, certainly post-Watergate after the excesses of then, and it's just become completely shattered. And so now you have a president who is regularly using the Department of Justice to attack his political enemies, and it's barely even a story anymore. No one even seems to care anymore.
All right. Anti-Semitic online conspiracizing, targeting of political enemies. My goat grinder is even bigger. It's a stupid commercial I saw while watching a football game. So someone buys a toaster on Visa, and then Christian McCaffrey, really good running back, has the toaster and runs through a den of hackers, chucking them out the window, staring down with a really mismatched eyesight, saying, "I don't like you hackers. I don't like you identity thieves. I'm protecting this toaster." And then some Visa spokesman says, Christian McCaffrey represents what Visa is going to do to protect your toaster. This was the most confusing commercial I have ever seen, but I figured out why. So you have McCaffrey coming down in the elevator, and then there's this den of hackers. Now, it looks, if you do a freeze frame, as I did, in the background, one of them seems to be eating Chinese food, but there's another one at his monitor. Then there's just a standard, a lone shot of a hacker who's wearing a black beanie and a black outfit, like he's a cat burglar, but also a hacker. And he's staring, again, the eye line doesn't match anything. He's just staring into space. And then he's ejected from this glass enclosure. And then the spokesperson says, Visa will protect you. So was the hacker's den like in the business that also was delivering the toaster? Was the Visa protection lady also working in this office building? Here's how I figured it out. This was a maybe 15-second commercial, 20-second commercial on an NFL game. I found the more lengthy commercial, and it's exactly like 3 Days of the Condor, which was taken from the book 6 Days of the Condor. And when you cut out 3 days, there are so many unanswered questions there. So they cut the minute-long or 45-second commercial down to 20-second. No eye lines match. And I don't understand why Christian McCaffrey, who's a very elusive running back, is the epitome of someone who's going to protect your toaster. But this really does grind my gears. I mean, it's a little, let's be honest, it's a little more serious than rampant anti-Semitic conspiracizing or the targeting of enemies. I mean, this, I think, does rise to the top of the list of things that should grind our gears and get our goats.
I have to say, I absolutely loved that rant right there. That was fantastic. I respect.
Are you going to use
much.
Visa to protect your toaster?
By the way, the identity thing is all kind of BS too, right? Because it's really just protect the credit card companies from getting charged if your credit card gets stolen.
This is another really good point. Don't ever choose a bank or credit card company by how they're going to protect your stuff. By law, if you are the victim of a scam, they have to replace your stuff.
Yeah, it's really to protect them, not to protect you.
To give a compliment to the commercial, the toaster was this very distinctive light blue, and that stayed consistent. So that was the one part. The star of that commercial was the toaster.
Was it a two-bread toaster or was it a toaster oven?
That's a good question. Definitely not a toaster oven.
Okay.
Colin,
like a pop-up kind of a toaster thing.
Could you just think about what you're saying before you say it?
I could have said that to you. I could have said that to you 5 minutes ago, Mike.
Yeah, I know. Many minutes. Well, until next time, I have to say, I want to thank you, Michael A. Cohen. I want to thank you, Jamie Kirchik. A good conversation. Thank you guys both.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
And until next time, we are not saying we're right. We're not acknowledging that you're right, but we are saying we're not even mad.